Good evening to all the listeners around the world. Myself, Subhashish Modak. I am the podcast host for Airworthy Talks at Udan Aviation Academy. And for today's episode, we have got the very young and dynamic Chief Technical Officer Digital from Acumen Aviation, Mr. Ameya Gore. Ameya,
Thanks.
welcome to the show.
Thanks, Subhashish. Thanks for having me.
Right. A brief about Ameya. Ameya is an alumni of IIM Bangalore and the Toulouse Business School. He's a certified aircraft appraiser from the International Society of Transport Aircraft Trading. And today we are here to discuss about one of the buzz which is going on within the aviation space itself, something which is not pretty much unknown within the sort of aviation domain, is that the world of aviation finance and leasing. Now, just before we started the show, Ameya was talking about how the world has changed from the 80s till now, and what is the percentage of aircraft which are now being financed and leased currently in the market. So right from 500 to 2000, so we see a 4x shift out here. So just wanted to know, Ameya, from you itself, why there is a need of aircraft finance and leasing industry at the first place.
Okay, so just a quick correction, Subhashish. It's 500 to 12,000, not
Wow.
2,000. So
There you
it's
go.
it's it's a more significant shift. So a little bit of a history into this. It's aviation has been around since the 1920s. Actually, now we're just about going to over about 100 years of aviation now. However, the overall leasing industry started back in 70s from Guinness Peak Aviation in Ireland and so on and so forth. Um, the To answer it very shortly, it's the access to flexible fleets, one, and the secondly is the avoidance of investments for airlines into very capital intensive assets, which is why the leasing basically has grown over the years. So back before 70s or 80s, when leasing was not as dominant force of financing and having airplanes, airlines would use to actually own majority of their airplanes. However, what has shifted is as new programs have come out, airlines do want to improve their fleets, have younger airplanes in their operating fleets and improve their revenue over the period of operation. So this has actually led to the airline industry embracing the leasing option, and the lessors actually also offering more and more diverse solutions in the leasing and financing space. So that's where you see the shift happening. As of for 2020, Boeing or Airbus commercial forecast that you can look at, it's almost about 46 to 50% fleet worldwide now are leased airplanes. So that's significant. There's still 50% which are owned, and yeah, that's the way the balance is today.
Quite an insight out there. I mean, you rightly mentioned, as the world moved from, being from a very sort of bilateral markets to when the market got liberalized. And obviously, with that came in a lot of the airlines wanted a lot of fleet flexibility, and that's where the world of aviation finance and leasing got explored. A lot of data points which you mentioned about. There is one important thing which we are going to do in today's podcast is that we will give a downloadable resource for all our listeners so that they
Yep,
could definitely go through the data. So thank you, Ameya, for that insight.
no
Now,
problem.
Ameya, perfect. Thank you. So wanted to know what has made you join this domain. What is your curiosity to join this domain particularly?
It's actually by accident that I'm in aviation. To be really honest, I am a chemistry graduate. I'm a bachelor's of science in chemistry, a postgraduate in industrial chemistry. But back in 2006 is where by accident I ended up joining Jet Airways and started my aviation career. During those 3 years from 2006 to 2009, I worked in Jet Airways, which was um, a, a, an excellent time because I got exposed to the leasing industry from an airline's perspective, though. So I was in the back office services in engineering quality, where I used to deal with a lot of leasing representatives who used to visit Jet Airways and conduct their audits and inspections of the leased assets. And that's where I got exposed to the leasing industry, and the curiosity basically started from there. Uh, Also, having done a few projects on returning leased airplanes back to the lessors, and being part of that team kind of enhanced my knowledge about the leasing industry, and piqued my interest in being a leasing representative. Basically, that's the equivalent of a foot soldier in an army, who you have to go through the ranks to earn your stars, right? So that's what I've done basically from 2009 onwards. When I joined Acumen, I started my journey in the leasing and finance industry, and slowly but surely the interest kept on growing to go deeper into this industry, and learn as much as I can. So that's where the journey has started, and that's where I'm going on till date.
Right, and that's quite quite something which should inspire all our aviation students out here as well. You had a degree in organic chemistry, and then shifting to aviation industry is itself marvelous, because there are a lot of students who try to time things within the industry,
Mhm.
whereas that is not, I mean, I'm not saying that is the right approach, but then sometimes you have to just go with the flow and see where the sort of world leads you to. So
Mhm.
that's a very good thing out here. Now, since you have been in this domain for the last 10 years and you have seen this exponential growth within what this domain could offer, could you tell us how a typical aviation leasing organization look like, and what are the
Mhm.
different departments and job roles within, let's say, a leasing organization? You could take Acumen. Yeah.
Sure. So one has to understand that aircraft leasing or financing organization is primarily a, a commercial organization, right? Their interests are in the commercial activity. Having said that, so before I go on, basically, when we say commercial activity, it entails three basic uh, business verticals, which is finance. You have to have financial accountants and the money people, as I call them. They have to be there to kind of look after the overall revenue streams and all finance related aspects. There has to be a commercial team, and the difference between a commercial and a financial team is the commercial team actually handles a lot of the market based activity, market research, commercial strategies around where the organization has to kind of move into, what kind of assets to purchase, things like that. And the third most important aspect is legal, right? So legal plays a big role in any financial organization, because as with financial or commercial risks come legal risks, right? So these three verticals are essentially common across any leasing company, so as to speak. Now, as leasing entails in the context of our subject today, it entails physical assets, which is the airplanes. You also Most leasing companies also have a small but very potent technical team, right? And the technical team involves people from aviation domain. Obviously, these are aviation people. They could be aircraft engineers. They could be people with a world of experience in operations, flight ops, or things like that. And then the other aspect of it is obviously any leasing company that has is um, a, a, a small but again a potent team of people who manage all the field activities. So there is one thing about the fleet,
Right.
which is managing the overall fleet operations, and there is obviously a lot of data that gets generated. So somebody manages that, but there is a small team of people who are essentially managing all the field activities for that leasing company. And the last one that most companies have now started to have is or rather have had, but are putting in a lot of onus on is a risk department. Okay, so these guys are the ones who actually look after the overall macroeconomic, microeconomic risks. They look after the airline credit risks and things like that. So they kind of work very closely with the financial, commercial, legal teams to mitigate or put in strategies to mitigate risks. So these are the overall verticals.
Right.
Um, I will slightly add further that there is a category of people called asset managers. They don't necessarily always can be termed as lessors, right? Because they
Hmm.
may not have financed their airplanes themselves, or they could be managing the assets on behalf of somebody else, or the financiers. So that's the kind of company that Acumen is.
Hmm.
So we have more business verticals like Camo, where
Hmm.
we provide Camo services for managing airplanes. We have a commercial lease management vertical which provides that service. We have valuation people like myself and a whole valuation team who does a lot of these appraisals. And we have a digital team as well, which kind of caters to the IT or digital systems that are put in place for managing the data that we have. So that's the four additional business verticals that we can think of in putting in our company.
Right, right, and it's quite sort of unheard of, because
Mhm.
whenever you think about in aviation per se setup, and I'm purely talking about an avg perspective, you think
Mhm.
about a lot of known job roles, but then here you have got this plethora of departments which are not that heard of, but then which are
Yep.
directly linked to aviation related products and service offerings.
Yep.
So quite an insight out there, Ameya. Um, Also, now I want to link. You have already talked about Acumen and what are the different departments in it. You have been a true brand ambassador for Acumen over a decade or so. Okay, and I just wanted to know what has been your journey with Acumen, and as you mentioned, you have rised up the ranks and reached to a level where you are today. And obviously, there are a lot of milestones which you might have achieved on the way. We hear so much about Sparta from your LinkedIn profile as well. So could you just tell us about your journey, basically? Yeah.
Sure. So, just going back to 2009, when I was still with Jet Airways, I was actually very keen on shifting lines towards the leasing and finance industry. Um, our CEO Alok Anand, who is Acumen CEO, back then he used to be the person doing the tech rep work, right? Like doing all the inspections on site. I happen to be one of the Jet Airways engineers assigned to assist him on one of the inspections of leased assets, and that's when I actually got in touch with him for the first time. Subsequently, what happened over fast forward a few months from that, in November or late October, I got a call from him asking if I'm really interested in shifting over, and if yes, then I need to kind of find my way out of Jet within a week. Now we're talking about 3 years of relationship to be terminated within a week, but it's what life is all about. So starting with 2009, I started essentially working as a independent contributor or a technical representative, as we call in the leasing industry, doing a lot of field projects, traveling, 20 days a month, and traveling to kinds of places and doing projects, and just it's like a continuous journey, project after project. In 2011 is when I actually moved towards a more of a managerial role in setting up and establishing a business vertical called data management for one of the leasing companies who were our clients, and we basically onboarded 4 or 5 data analysts. I set up the team. I did all the hiring. We also actually partnered with one of our Chennai-based software partners back then to design and develop an online document management system called Adept. And that was my first experience as creating a product, creating a digital product. Um, then again from 2011 till 2015, I continued to grow the business, add more clients, add more people. But again, that craving for the field kicks in, once you've done that. So in January 2016, I moved back to the technical and asset management team. Started managing a lot of projects, not doing so many of them myself, but managing a ton of them. Um, and between 2016 and 2019 is when I did most of my TAM project management work rose through the and I'm not very fancy about designations, but that's where I kind of saw a lot of growth in terms of rank and grade within Acumen, at one point leading the overall global operations team, and doing 120 plus projects a year. Between that period from 2013 till 2017 is when I also focused on getting my ISTAT appraiser certification, because that was a big deal. And just so that the listeners know, there's only about 80 odd certified ISTAT appraisers in the world for a fleet of what, 25-30,000 airplanes in the commercial space. So that's a very niche, very small group of experts who kind of work in that industry. And that kind of intrigued me, that we didn't have anybody in India doing appraisal. So
Right.
that's where the challenge was, and I took it on. 2018, 2020 was some of the most beautiful years, doing MBA from Toulouse Business School and IIM Bangalore. A ton of learning, ton of academics, and a little bit of college fun as well back in the days. And then in 2019, late 2019 is when we actually set up the digital business vertical that I head today. The reason was, again, we were creating Sparta as a overall solution for this market that we know doesn't have one stop solution for its entire spectrum of activities that I talked about. And that has been our driving force in providing not only a great service, but a great platform to go with to manage the assets digitally. And in 2019, we basically set up a full development team and a product team in house. And because I had a lot of experience from Adept in dealing in products, I kind of brought that forward to leading this team. So that's where the overall journey has been. And yeah, I mean, still going strong in terms of Sparta is still getting developed. It's still evolving as a platform. There's a ton of things happening on that front. So our customers can kind of get the best of both worlds from us.
Definitely, that's quite an inspiring journey and something which is fueled with technology throughout.
Yep.
I could definitely see that throughout the time since we have joined Acumen, there is a lot of technology, a lot of data-driven decision, a lot of thinking what the client wants and then sort of
Yep.
taking it from there. Quite a journey and quite an inspiration for our students as well, is to sort of always push beyond your standard limits.
Oh
There are
yeah.
opportunities which will like in case of yours, it was just a 1 week thing, right? And you have to
Yeah.
make that switch, and here you are.
Yep. Yep.
So it's very important, yeah, that way.
No, so I think just to expand on that, like I have my own quirks in this case. Is like I just believe in one very basic fundamental is, if you want X, right? If you want anybody to give you X, whether it's
Mm,
respect, money, whatever it is, you have to be able to give 4x of that value in return, minimum, right?
mm.
And if you don't do that, it's you're there's dime a dozen people around you who will there's a lot of options today.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
you have to find ways to stand.
Very well said, very well said. And that is how it has to be. We have to be very practically oriented
Yep.
and result driven, or else the competition is out there to take care of you
Yep.
eventually in the
Yep.
long run.
Yep.
Right. Now, because we are on the topic of aviation finance and leasing,
Mhm.
there is one challenge with a lot of aviation learners find it difficult to identify.
Mm.
The identification is the differentiation between finance and leasing. because
Hmm.
both of these terms are quite interchangeable. You tend to say those words in the flow of things. Okay, finance
Right.
and leasing. But then those
Right.
are two different. So could you tell us, our learners, as to what the difference is? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, it first of all, it goes hand in hand because it is the way it works, right? You cannot have an asset on lease without it being financed by somebody, and that somebody typically happens to be the lessor. But there is a very distinct differentiation between finance and leasing. I would say finance is basically about funding the aircraft, right? You have to purchase it to put it on lease, and when it has to be financed, it means that somebody has to lend you that money, or you have to raise your own money, and therefore those are all finance related aspects. How do you get that asset physically on your hands, right? The leasing is the secondary process of how to recover the money that you have taken on as debt or for the finance. How do you recover that money? So the process that gets you that money, gets you that return on investment, is what leasing does, right? So a very simple example is, you let's say you purchase an aircraft for 45 million, and we go with a very basic way of funding, which is debt funding, right? You take a bank debt for whatever 85% of that value. You have to pay an interest rate on that to the bank, and pay off that whatever 40 million or whatever you have taken, right? Now, how do you recover that
Recover.
money? So you have to lease it to somebody who is going to pay you a rental on that, right? So these are the basic two aspects, that finance is about funding and leasing is about recovering that money to fund that asset. Now,
Absolutely.
as you grow more complex in terms of how to finance and how to lease, and then there are various strategies to optimize your profit margins, optimize your ROI. And that's where the complexity actually goes much deeper. But at a very basic level, this is what it is.
Right. In very simple words, we have put this
Yeah.
across. So obviously, very well said out there,
Mhm.
Ameya. Um, yeah. So I mean, this is something which always sort of it's for me in person. When we talk about leasing or sort of financing an asset, let's say through a bank, what are the general interest rates which are out there?
Oh, wow. It depends market
Hmm.
to market. Yeah. The
Right.
reason is that, each, depending on where the bank is located, what regulatory bodies govern the
Hmm.
financing and banking industry in that particular jurisdiction, it likely dictates a lot of that.
Hmm.
The general interest rates or discount rates could range between anywhere between like 2%
Hmm.
to like 12% or 15%. Now the
Hmm.
difference that comes in is primarily as, what are aircraft classified as in that
Hmm.
particular industry. Are there investor friendly
Hmm.
regulations in place for airplanes or aviation in general, or are they categorized as any other machinery, and therefore it doesn't really give you a lot of benefit in funding it? That's where the difference in interest rates comes from.
Right.
If you see Ireland, which is the hub of the
Hmm.
aviation leasing and finance industry, they are extremely tax friendly
Hmm.
and investor friendly jurisdiction. So
Hmm.
therefore, they get a much more lenient. I wouldn't say lenient, but they get more friendly interest rates from the bank. I have seen data which suggests that, in certain jurisdictions like North America or places, a particular asset type, or if it is a aviation asset, could be the interest rate for financing it could be as low as 2%, right?
Wow.
And
Hmm.
then there are other benefits that come with it in terms of book depreciation and so on and so forth. I think it's, for the interest of time and this discussion, it's not very sensible
Right.
to go in that depth. But yeah, I hope you have answered the question in the
Yeah,
sense
yeah,
it ranges. It ranges a lot between different jurisdictions.
definitely. And there are multitude of factors to it, right?
Correct.
True.
Yep.
Yeah. So, um, when you look at the Indian aviation industry, particularly the airline sector in particular, the rise of low-cost airlines is quite evident.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at various reasons as to why the rise is. And there is always a technical answer which comes is because there are a lot of aircraft which are under lease, there is no huge capital investment upfront, and you could lease them. So sell and lease back comes within the picture. Now, I just wanted to know what are the different types of aircraft leases which are available, and I mean, why sell and lease back is the predominant one which generally comes up. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I want to address here is that when we say type of leases, right, there is
Yeah.
a difference between, so sale and leaseback is not a kind of lease.
Uh-huh.
Actually speaking, it's not a type of lease. It's a type of asset acquisition. It's a strategy to acquire an asset.
Hmm.
So I'll come to that. But to answer your first question, what are the types of leases? There could be a dry lease, which is a basic asset given on by the lessor to the airline, and it is airline's responsibility to operate it, maintain it. So the what we call is as aircraft crew maintenance and insurance.
Hmm.
That is completely the operator or the lessee's responsibility.
Right.
The second one is a damp lease, which is kind of a mix between a dry and a wet lease. A wet lease, so let me say, wet lease is basically a ACMI lease where
Hmm.
the lessor is responsible for the aircraft crew maintenance and insurance, and they give it on a ACMI lease to the operator. The operator only operates it, right,
Right.
on as per the flight schedules and things like that. The damp lease could be somewhere in the middle where either the lessor might give aircraft and maintenance or aircraft and insurance, while crew and maintenance becomes the lessee's responsibility. So there are various combinations in that, and it is a more of a each lessee function. Then there is something. So all three of these fall under the category of an operating lease.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
Then there is something financial lease. The financial lease is basically where the lessee has an option to actually purchase or transfer the ownership of that asset at the end of the lease period.
Lease period. Yeah.
All right.
Hmm.
And the way it functions is there is a pre-decided value in the future at which once the lease term ends, the lessee has to pay out that amount, and basically the lessor then transfers the ownership to the lessee. Very, very simple terms. It's very much equivalent to extremely long-term leases that we have that happen in infrastructure, right? Like a lot of times it happens, or it used to happen in real estate as well, that if you are a tenant for more than 50 years, you have
Hmm.
paid out enough amount to actually be considered as the owner, and the
Yeah.
ownership can transfer. So that's the way. Now, coming to answer your sale and leaseback, so it's basically a asset acquisition strategy where
Hmm.
the airline essentially goes to the manufacturer and places a very large order of airplanes.
Yeah.
And they basically do certain pre-delivery payments, also called PDPs. Okay,
Hmm.
and they decide on a particular value of that or the purchase price of that aircraft beforehand. Like the order is negotiated, and at per unit cost or per aircraft cost is pre-decided. Now, one has to understand that the airlines do not really have that much cash outlay to actually purchase and outright own those assets. So what they do is they go to the lessors after that, and they actually sell those future aircraft which are not even delivered today. They sell those future aircraft to the lessor at a particular price, which at times can be at a slightly higher value than
Yeah.
what they actually going to get the purchase price of the aircraft.
Yeah.
And that's where they make a little bit of that extra money
Hmm.
for against whatever PDPs they might have paid. So they kind of tend to recover a little bit of that cost. Now, what's in it for the lessor, right? The lessor basically gets to decide a chunk of aircraft as per their own fleet strategy, and they also have the benefit of having a lessee on their books.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they have the benefit of that relationship, and they know that they won't have to market the aircraft independently when the time actually comes to take the delivery of the aircraft.
Hmm.
So this is the reason sale and leaseback is becoming so popular, because the lessors get the benefit of a fairly decent pre-negotiated price, and they get a lessee who is going to take the aircraft on lease, right? For the lessee, for the airline, the benefit is they have negotiated at a volume discount price with the OEM, and also they get the benefit of a little bit of the premium that they can sell those aircraft at, and then they also get the benefit of taking that aircraft on lease when it actually delivers from the OEM.
Absolutely right. I mean, in depth, you have explained it, and such is the depthness of these topics which we are actually touching today. I mean, these topics are courses within themselves. So thank you for that insight. And obviously, sale and leaseback at the end becomes a win-win for everyone at the end of the day. Yeah,
it does. It does. In most cases, it does.
Right. Yep. True. Now, let's try to know a bit more on finance, and we'll just scratch the surface out here. So, just wanted to know what are the different types of aircraft finances which are available. Yeah.
Okay, so very broadly categorizing, they are typically either debt or equity based, financing structures. So one is basically a bank debt. So outright, large banks like Wells Fargo or Bank of America or Royal Bank of Scotland. These are very robust financial, financiers in this space. Who will lend out a bank debt, and they will basically earn their interest rate, and that's how you fund the aircraft. The second way is capital markets. So capital markets is more about the companies trading their bonds or derivatives, or accessing stock market capacities to actually raise capital, right? And they do so based on their organization's financial capacity and things like that. So these are the two broad, very, very common options. The third one is obviously cash, but there are very few markets or very few airlines in the world who are cash rich, and these are typically government backed, or funding is available, or they are actually flagship national carriers who have the capacity to actually take it on cash. The fourth option is export credit agencies. So what happens a lot of that is, in markets which do not have a very robust economy, the government would kind of back it by through export credit agencies to kind of support the financing of airplanes. Apart from that, there are other things like tax equity, or basically writing off certain the depreciation and the tax benefits that you get, and that kind of gets used as a way of financing the assets. So these are the broad five or six ways of financing the aircraft.
Right. Quite an insightful thing out here, Ameya. Now, there is this wonderful section in our podcast where we listen to our audience, which is obviously the aviation geek community, and we try to understand that, okay, here is, we have an expert from this particular domain, and how they could sort of guide them to become the one within the industry. So, my sort of couple of, sort of top of my head questions out here. How can an aviation aspirant get a foot in the door when you talk about the aviation finance and leasing industry? What is the starting point? Yeah.
So I think there are multiple ways of doing it. It largely depends on, as I mentioned, there are so many different departments or different functions, right? Business functions within the aviation finance and leasing industry. Each has its own requirements in terms of skills and competencies. So let me start with finance, right? So for entering into the finance side of the industry, you obviously have to know cost accountancy, or you have to have a commerce background, or know finance, or you could be anybody from a commerce graduate with a specialization in finance, or you could be an MBA in finance, or things like that. Now the second aspect is commercial. So these guys are actually a mixed breed of marketing people,
Right.
but who also have a strong aviation background. So I know a lot of commercial people who have been aviation engineers, but their entire focus has been the commercial side of maintenance or commercial side of the operation. So they become really good at, and they have a sales hat as well. So they are
Right.
able to kind of dabble between these things. When we talk about legal, it's again straightforward. You have to have a law degree, or you have to have some kind of a paralegal background, or counselor, or solicitor kind of
Right.
roles.
Hmm.
When we come to the core technical aspect of it, of course, you have to have a strong aviation background. You could have been either an aviation maintenance engineer, or somebody who's worked in airline environment in these
Hmm.
support services like maintenance planning, tech services, engineering quality, um, or even base maintenance for that matter.
Right.
If you have worked in base or line maintenance, they are kind of picked up quickly.
Hmm.
And then if you talk about the camo or these kind of things, then you have to have regulatory experience in either records, hardcore records review, or regulatory aspects of the industry and things like that. Valuations is a completely different breed. It is something that it is like a multifaceted aspect, where you have to understand the aircraft, you have to understand its maintenance procedures and policies, etc. And you have to also be very good at finance in terms of not balancing the books or anything like that, not cost accountancy, but very good at understanding how financing industry works. Um, and that's where kind of it becomes a very different ball game. So yeah, that's how anyone, if you fit in any of these kind of experience roles, you could go into these sub verticals of the finance and leasing industry.
Definitely. And yes, there are a lot of entry points out here which you have just mentioned. It's not
Sure.
only pure aviation side people who could
Yeah.
enter, but then people who are into finance or someone who has
Sure.
been into a law can develop their careers
Yeah.
within the industry. Such ways. Right, quite insightful. Now talking about from the HR perspective out here.
Hmm.
Okay, there are some of the key skill sets which sort of HRs they look into, particularly in the leasing and finance domain. And obviously, those will depend from job role to job role. But if you want to sum up around certain, top of the head key skill sets which someone need to have to join this industry, what will be this? Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a question that I because I don't come from HR
Mhm.
perspective, right? Well, what I could say is like what I would look for, right? If
Right.
somebody was to join, let's say in the tech rep or leasing representative or that kind of a role,
Mhm.
I would certainly look for somebody who has excellent skills on the aircraft, who knows the aircraft, but having more than that, somebody who understands the nuances of people management, because
Mhm.
you have to have a very balanced attitude towards what you're expected to do on the
Mhm.
field. And secondly, there has to be real passion for work. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean like straight 20-hour days, 7 days a week and things like that. But a lot of the work that we do on the field does not come with fixed hours. It is totally dependent on the flight schedules, totally dependent on external variables, which have to be kind of taken into account. And somebody with a mindset of you know being very quick on their feet is very important to me. If we talk about the desk side of things, or the back office kind of things, people who understand or can correlate how a particular issue can impact the overall value of the asset or downstream impact. uh, Somebody has that eye for detail is something very valuable in a person. Um, on on yeah on the rest of the verticals, I mean, it is more of a application of the skill sets to a
Right.
very um, large scale impact basis. But one thing is very important that people should realize is this industry has very low margin for error, whether it is operations, flying an aircraft, maintaining an aircraft, or even valuing an aircraft, or managing an aircraft, right? The margins of error don't really change too much. And that is something that people have to understand when they want to join this industry. That
Right.
it doesn't work if you have attitude, yeah, it's okay, I messed up. No, there's it doesn't work that way.
Right, right. Very well said out there, Amia. Very well said. Now, the sheer nature of the industry is very dynamic.
Hmm.
Whatever we learn today becomes obsolete after 5 years, 6 years. So we have to continuously upskill ourselves, enhance our knowledge. And you have been someone who have been doing it. You continuously look to learn the latest and greatest out there. So just wanted to know and sort of tell also our listeners the importance of lifelong learning, which is basically there.
So, there are tons of people who talk about lifelong learning and want to get into it and things like that. The way I see it is that it's actually boils down to a lot of introspection. You have to be sure of what you wish to do and where you wish to go, because lifelong learning shouldn't be that okay, you start learning everything under the sun, right? You have to be very specific as to what you wish to learn and where you wish to apply it. So in my opinion, what is very important to decide your learning is to decide what outcomes you want from that learning, and then go for it. That's what I have always tried to do is expand on something that you have learned so that you can apply it into multiple other areas. Examples being that okay, I started off when I did get into the job in aviation, I decided okay, this is going to be my career. I made sure that I learned about the aircraft. I made sure that I took that time and effort to actually go down into base maintenance and stay around the engineers and learn from them outright. There's a ton of things that you learn from people that you don't learn from books. And then that's where that I gained enough of that. I took great deal of effort to fight for opportunities in doing these redelivery projects or doing something that was very much outside of my comfort zone, and also what people won't even bet on you for, right? That
Right.
they might look at you and say like you don't have the skill sets. Well, it's okay, I will acquire the skills along the way, but what I want is the opportunity, right? So overcoming that fear of failure and overcoming that fear of saying that okay, am I good enough, is something that comes with attitude, and that is something that is very essential. Now, as far as lifelong learning, if you talk about professional or academia, I firmly believe that no knowledge is usually wasted, but it is certainly redundant if you don't apply it in the right manner, right?
Right.
So that's very important. So whatever you decide to learn, please make sure you know where you're going to apply it. Otherwise, there's no sense in doing that. You might as well spend your time on something more fruitful. And that's what I've basically done all my career. The last one thing that I would say is I always have my sights on the next thing, right? So I always do an assessment of if I want to, let's say, go in that direction, whatever direction it is, if I wish to go to the next step, or if I have my senior or somebody that I look up to, I always try to look at okay, if I wanted to do that person's job, what do I need to achieve? Is it academia? So I would study that person in the sense that okay, what academic skills does he have? What professional skills does he have? What behavioral skills does he have? What experience and expertise does he have? And then assess myself also to see where the gaps are, and then start working towards filling it. Because you cannot expect to be given a job when you don't fulfill that person's capabilities or that job capabilities that you need. And that's where the career planning actually comes into play. So that's my mantra, if I were to call it, as to how I conduct myself in my career.
Excellent, excellent. That's how sort of uh, good the approach is from your end. Because I see a lot of students today, they think about a particular buzz and they end up getting a certificate in it. They spend a lot of money, a lot of hours, a lot of
Hmm.
precious time. But then, with once the certificate is acquired, there is no application of that certificate. And then they start to actually challenge the authenticity of that certificate because of the non-application side of it. So it's very important to pace ourselves, to understand, to challenge ourselves, and based on those, we could definitely upskill ourselves.
Yeah,
Very, very insightful. Yeah.
and while we are on that, I would just say that that certificate or that piece of paper means nothing, actually
Yeah.
speaking. Very,
Mhm.
I'll tell you this outright. It doesn't give you a golden ticket to anywhere.
Mm.
All it does is it gets you a foot in the door, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what you do with that piece of paper and what you have learned to acquire that piece of paper is what really matters, whether you are able to apply that or not. Without
Right.
that, it's nothing more than a piece of paper on the wall. So it doesn't matter.
Definitely. Definitely. Right. Thank you, Ameya, for those wonderful insights, and thank you for taking us through this journey of finance and leasing, your personal journey. Now,
Sure.
moving on to our final session or
Sure.
final section of our today's podcast, we call it as the rapid fire round.
Okay.
And we'll definitely ask you certain simple, easy questions, and we are looking for one-liners out here.
Okay.
So, right. So, my first question to you is, what is that one thing which you have started to do in this pandemic, which you were not doing previously?
Uh, Focusing on my health.
Hmm. Right, right. Very nice. Now, you come from a waiter. You come from obviously, someone who is very strategic in nature. So I just wanted to know, what do you trust more? You trust the data or you trust your intuition?
Intuition.
Very nice, very nice. What's your favorite activity on a typical weekend?
Well, starts with working out, and then possibly catching up with friends, or going out for a meal with the family. And yeah, with if I have the leisure, then yeah, reading books. That's what I like.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now, what is that one word that best describes your personality?
Wow. I would say persevering.
Hmm.
Uh, that's probably sums it up pretty much.
Right. And it is reflective from what we have discussed today. So, bang on out there. Now, my final rapid fire question to you is, your favorite place to go after bunking a class at Sathe College?
Oh, there is a place called the Point. Okay, right next to Satay College, which doesn't exist unfortunately anymore. But it's moved a few kilometers away. But yeah, that used to be a hangout point there.
Perfect. The point is your hangout point. Perfect. Right. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Ameya, for those wonderful insights, and thank you for sharing
Thanks.
this fun little element as well. We look forward to interacting more with you. Thank you for sparing your
Sure.
time. Thank you.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much. Cheers, guys. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.